Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the first edition for 2024 of Asymmetric Habits. So, JP and I are here for yet another year of wholesome, fun loving, successful advice. And basically, our entire purpose with this, of course, is to help people find ways to improve their lives, make things a little bit more successful, a little bit easier, less stressful. You name it, just any type of real habit or change that you're trying to make to just live life a little bit more on your terms. So today is pretty much right in that sweet spot, the beauty of single tasking. We without a doubt live in a world that glorifies being busy, how much can you do, more and more and more. And if we ourselves aren't, I know you know lots of people out there who talk about being good multitaskers, or like they wear it as a badge of pride in essence, or they talk about how you have to get better at it. And as we've devoted entire episodes of the show before to how when people basically like think that they would need to change something, what is their immediate response? They add more things to do. Um, so I said all of this comes really into today's topic about why more people should why you should spend a little bit more time focusing on how you can single task to make things better, make things a little bit less stressful, and actually become again like more efficient and just achieve some of your goals faster.
And so I realized that there's a tendency for me starting this off to start off with a concept, which is it's actually worse than you think it is, and apparently that's going to happen today. So it's worse than most people think it is,
Hmm.
because multitasking is glorified. But there's another problem with it that really was not obvious to me until I was really had been in counseling for a long time, seeing clients and realizing something. Uh, One of the problems with multitasking, as far as I can tell, for most people, it feels better than single tasking. It feels more productive, and that puts it in this like kind of narrow field of place of things because most of the stuff we talk about. Uh, the things we suggest after a while actually start to feel better. Whether it's like get more sleep. After a few weeks of getting more sleep, you feel better and it's very noticeable. Or, attending to nutrition or hydration or doing, paying attention to your neurological resources. All of those things tend to feel better after you start working on a habit. Multitasking seems for most people to be immune to that. Multitasking seems to always feel better than single tasking, which leads to a problem because in a lot of cases, it's correct for us to trust our felt sense of, how is a thing going. If you're doing a workout and your body feels worse after 6 weeks of doing the workout, you can reliably guess that something might be wrong with the workout or something related in that constellation of things. Relying on your felt sense as it relates to multitasking or single tasking is actually setting up for failure. And not only did I not know that for a long time, I assume most people actually don't have a clue that that's happening, which is why it's such just a monster trying to get away from the habit of multitasking. Because if a person's trying to feel more productive, they feel more productive multitasking. It just turns out that in most cases they're not actually more productive.
Mhm. And I think it's also one of these situations where those rare moments where you are actually in a pretty good multitasking flow, like relatively speaking, a good multitasking flow. It does seem like it goes so well where you're like, "Oh, this is great." When those are definitely peak moments and not the sustainable average even when that happens. Most of the time, we're honestly kind of middling around when multitasking a lot.
Yeah.
So do you there's part of that, I mean, that makes sense to me about it actually, like, just feeling better. Part of it to me thinks is, we have so many things on our minds at all times these days, and that it is multitasking in essence almost like a subconscious feeling of like, "Okay, at least I'm paying more of the things on my mind attention." and not just like letting them go. It's almost like a fear that if you don't pay attention to multiple things at once, then it's going to get out of hand. Like,
I,
is that part of it
I
for
don't know
people?
that I've thought about it that way, but now that you propose it, I feel like I could buy into that. Uh, because we all have stories that we tell ourselves, and I think many people tell themselves a story of, oh God, I'm going to fall behind. And if you can then turn around and tell yourself the story of, well, I worked on 20 things today, that feels more in line with not falling behind than I got a lot of distance on one or two important things today. So, yeah, I don't think I've ever thought about it that way, but I would be pretty comfortable betting that that happens for a lot of people.
Mhm. Very cool. So let's actually bring up some of the science on this, because this does have a pretty decent amount of science uh, and studies already going into it. But like one of my favorites that I always remember, and anytime that I find myself struggling with multitasking, this is one of the things I try to remind myself with, is when it comes to your focus and your attention. I've seen that it takes anywhere from 33 to 66% of the time that you basically switch focus back to something. So, like if you're working on something and that's let's say your main priority, and this isn't quite the same example, but let's say somebody comes into your office and talks to you for like 10 minutes, that if you're when you go to switch back into what you're doing, if that took 10 minutes, it can take you anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes for your mind to kind of get back to where it was at on the original priority at hand.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that. I've never read any of the science on the time frame portion, but that feels pretty okay. I'm much more familiar with the science on how much neurological expenditure is involved in task shifting. But based on that, thinking that like it would take 3 to 6 minutes to get back to a task after having an interruption seems in line with the parts of the science that I am familiar with. So yeah, I think that's right. And I think if we talked about like, okay, how does a person decide what to do about this? Uh, there's a couple things, and the reason I like what you said there is because one of the most important things if you're going to decide the single task is knowing what you have to use as your guidepost. Because if felt sense is not a good guidepost in this case, you have to have something else. And knowing the math is a pretty decent guidepost in the absence of actually being able to use your felt sense and your emotions to assist you. And let me talk about using the math for a second, because this is an area where people are going to have some difficulty if they're not familiar with it. So I'm going to put it into a couple of areas where people are familiar with it. Since we're already setting up to attack something, you're already going to know this is a trick question, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. It still allows for the point. If we were going to say just ask a random person, hey, if you were going to say what's a good success rate, like if you're going to like try and do a task and you either succeed or fail, what would be a good success rate just percentage wise?
60%.
Great. All right. You came up with that somehow. How you came up with it is not important, but one of the things that is important then, and you'll know the math of this, so now you'll be able to do the perspective shift. If I ask that exact same question, what is the what's a good success or failure rate on hitting a baseball?
300 or 30%, if we're doing it that way.
30%. We sliced it in half.
Mhm.
If you had a 60% success rate, you could be 75 years old and you'd still be being recruited by major league teams, because that's so outlandishly high in that context. And the reason we know that is because we are both familiar with the math, as will many people watching this. They'll be familiar with the math. Same thing with the game of poker. You can win 20% of your hands in the game of poker and walk away with more money than you came in with if you do your bets correctly, because you don't have to win every hand. The success rate doesn't have to be the same. Now, the reason this is important, and I'm framing all of this for the purpose of single tasking, is because if a person wants to transition to sticking with a single task longer in service of being able to get far more done on it, and felt sense is a bad guidepost, they have to be able to figure out, what is the math on this? Does it make sense for me to expend 3 hours working on a single thing? What is that going to get me? Because now that we're so used to multitasking, we're always going to have an internal pull towards that. And you have to have some story to tell yourself that will help you say yes to single tasking. If you have no story to tell yourself, then how are you supposed to ever say yes to actually single tasking? So I want to use that to jump off into this, and I think you'll probably have even different examples than I will, because one of the things that people have to figure out is sometimes it's correct to multitask. Like, I mean, sometimes you're at home and the kids are crying and dinner's not done, and the laundry needs done, and there's just 500 things happening. You got to figure out which 7 you're going to pursue. Single tasking might not be the right move there, but sometimes it is. Before I do my examples, what's the examples you would envision and you've heard of and you've heard people talk about where, yes, single tasking seems like a right move here?
Yeah. Well, I got two like specifically that have been running through my mind. One is on the what I would just call the work side, or just something that you really want to focus on for a while. And I pretty much already gave the word there. It's because like it it single tasking and going into it like improves or increases focus. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of the deep work like model, and I'm always a huge fan of building momentum in things like like just the ability to kind of keep going on things and go that way. And I found it for
Say
myself.
what deep work is for people who've
Yeah.
never
Okay.
heard
Yes.
that,
Yes.
because
Yes.
I know
Uh,
what it is, but people
yeah.
who listen and don't know.
So deep work, it's as far as I know, is coined by Cal Newport in his book Deep Work. I highly suggest that reading. It's really really good, and but it's a zone that you enter into with longer mostly uninterrupted flows of just thinking, working, actions, whatever on the single task. And it's basically like your body, your brain just getting, they're entering that zone. Like they are no longer on the superficial level of just simply working on something, thinking about it, but it starts to dig deeper as you become, as you keep focusing on it and you become more productive. You start having like better brain waves about it, more like both functional and creative. You start becoming better at problem solving. And that really takes time to get into. Like it's not something you can just switch onto by going, okay, I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes working on this over here. That's not enough for your brain to really start digging into it like that. So deep work gives you that, it takes up to a few hours even to just get into it and really start flowing. Like a great example that a lot of us may not actually experience, but we all know about is writers. Like writers tend to, whenever they're working on a new book or a new manuscript, they go into it and they try to, in a lot of cases, just like even isolate themselves. And we've actually talked before about just several other like very well known successful people. I know like Bill Gates has his week in the cabins, things like that, like who will take periods of isolation. And this isn't a new thing. Like we can go back over history and tons of like exceptions, like people who changed the world had periods of long isolation where they just focused on projects, on theories, and were able to come up with things that had never existed before.
Now
That
let me
was
ask you a
really
question to make
important.
this usable for a lot of people, because you brought up deep work. Now everybody's work, whether in their occupation or as a student, is a little different. So, what are maybe 2 or 3 things you actually sit down and single task on, so people have some examples here that really move the needle for your work?
Yeah. Well, actually, one I just got back to, and it made an enormous difference this week, was I spend a lot of my time writing workout programs. Like, at the gym, our workout programs are all individualized. So that means, yeah, like the more clients we have, the more workout programs we're writing. And we have roughly like 80 plus workouts to write. And as a whole, I do about 50 to 60 of them right now. And most of the time when I don't let myself plan, like when I don't let myself get prepared, I spend all week writing workouts usually for that day, and that takes me 2 to 4 hours per day, sometimes even more on busy days. And I basically feel like I can't do anything else that day. So something that I really wanted to get back onto was like batching that more like singly. And sure enough, like I didn't get it all done because it was still new. I had to like re-practice it in essence. But I got most of it done on Sunday, which is what I wanted to do. And then it only took me one more day to finish the rest. So entire week programming done in 1.5 days instead of my usual 5 days. Just
Now,
batching.
pause here because this I want to relate this to the thing I said because this is so important because it is not obvious that that would happen,
Mhm.
and we it would not people would not easily come up with that. And this is where I said knowing the math is important because single tasking feels terrible when you're trying to gain momentum in that first 10, 20, 30 minutes, maybe even 60 minutes, 2 hours, depending on how long it takes you to get into a rhythm. But then on the back end, the work is happening smoothly and quickly and rapidly enough that you actually save. How many hours does that work out to that you end up saving total on a week?
Oh, I mean, it not even hours. I basically have saved 3.5 days.
Okay.
Like,
So if we call that work days, that's 24, 28 hours. You save
yeah,
28 hours.
yeah, because like I have actually had this week where since Tuesday, I'm like, wow, I actually can wake up, not instantly be worried about being on a clock to get programs in. So, there's another positive benefit from it. I'm not like racing a clock, and I have all day until just whenever I'm scheduled to go coach to focus on to do what I want to do or focus on other like whatever I want to focus on instead of having to do this task.
So this is amazing because that's even better than I imagined it would be. Because like if we quizzed somebody and we're like, hey, if Jerry single tasks this and like just does it all at once and really gains some momentum and knocks it out, how many hours do you think he'll save? People who are familiar with the idea might be like, oh, he'll probably save 3 or 4 hours. Who in the hell is going to come up with 28?
Yeah. Hmm.
Like that is an amazing advertisement for the math of single tasking. Uh, in a way, it's almost a bad example because I feel like a lot of people's initial attempts at this will not save nearly that much time. So like it's going to create a false idea of exactly how much time you save. So I think I would say to anybody listening to this, don't expect that to happen on the first time because that's amazing results. Uh, but you've done something there, and I want to relate to it before I do my examples. Because a lot of people, if they have never tried to single task before, will have trouble figuring out what should I single task in service of
Mhm.
saving myself time, being more productive, moving the needle on my business, getting more things done, whatever a person's trying to do. Uh, and you provided such a wonderful example. So let's imagine I own a gym. I'm like, okay, what should I single task on that is going to help me the most? And I've never tried single tasking before, and anyone who's never owned a business, let me assure you, you have 1 million tasks that you could be doing at any given time. So selection can be difficult. The thing there's a good question. I've 100% stolen this question from elsewhere, but it's a good question that helps you figure out what should you single task on, and its unrealism helps a lot. The question is, if I could only work 2 hours a week on my business, and like I had a gun to my head and I was not allowed to work any more than 2 hours a week, what would I work on? Now, of course, you're going to work more than 2 hours a week on your business, but the thing you wouldn't come up with if you own a gym is you wouldn't come up with, I should spend that 2 hours a week cleaning. You would never come up with that. You might come up with, I should spend that 2 hours a week writing programs for my athletes. I should spend that 2 hours a week creating more advertising to bring in more people. I should spend that 2 hours a week figuring out what to replace my old equipment with because that needs done. There's a number of things you might come up with, all of which would probably be good candidates for single tasking. Uh, and for anybody who's curious where I stole the question from, I stole it from Tim Ferriss in his podcast. But that's a reasonably good way I've found to figure out, like, what are things that are eligible to single task on. Because you won't tend to come up with things that aren't desperately important. If I look at a med student and I say, hey, you can only work 2 hours a week on med school, they're going to intensely and immediately figure out, well, if I'm only allowed to do that, then clearly I will be doing all of my single task or all of my work on this test that I'm least prepared for. Great candidate for single task. So anyway, I just wanted to share that heuristic because I think that's, even though it's an unrealistic question, its unrealism helps reveal what are things that would be useful for single tasking. I feel like I went on a big long diatribe there.
Well, actually, it makes me very curious about what you're going to say about my second example. In terms of how, since you tend to, like, you're good at extrapolating usefulness in different ways. Because my second way is a physical multitask, and so the other example I was going to give was, since I work at a gym and I'm a strength and conditioning coach, is training. There is so much research. Now, strength and conditioning and exercise training has more research than it needs. And it has way too many people. Yeah, and it has way too many people who read only the lines and not any of the actual colored real life area. But like with those disclaimers said, concurrent training is the official term of doing different types of training together or at the same overall training block and phase. Now, the reason I bring that up is there are types of training that are very good done together. And then there are types of training that have been shown to have negative effects on each other if done at the same time. And I mean, the biggest one is training for like maximum strength and training for pure cardio and pure endurance. Like, surprise, training to really get up your max squat and deadlift numbers at the same time as you're training to improve your marathon time do not go super well together. Now, again, like, this is the thing. There are ways to do that correctly, and there are ways to improve both of those things. Those are the very hard to reach exceptions, but they can be there. And I feel like multitasking is the same way. Like I mentioned earlier, there's those moments where multitasking seems like it's going well, but those are, again, the exceptions and not the actual rule. I feel like people look at a lot of things and they're like, oh, these can be done well together at the same time, so I will do them at the same time because I want both things, but rather than paying attention to if they're actually doing the main task. So like when training,
I'm laughing because you're describing something I just got away from. I'll tell you, and then let you continue your narrative.
okay,
Uh, I had made up in the tail end of last year because I needed to get my cardio up. That what I would do is I would just lift weights faster to keep my heart rate up.
oh yeah, that's been done.
And I finally this year I finally just decided to give up that fantasy, and now I lift weights, and then at the end I stop lifting weights and go over the stairmaster and do 20 minutes of sustained state cardio on the stairmaster and quit pretending that I can multitask my workout.
Yeah, like that's something that a lot of people do is they try to just think that they can focus on too many things at once and get benefits out of it. Now, fitness is one of those things that's harder too, because early on, you will. Like, yeah, if you are just getting into these things, you will get stronger. Your cardio will get better all at the same time. But the better you get at them, and basically the bigger results you're trying to get, then you need to start paying more attention to one of them or the other. Again, you like over time, you can do both, but and that's going to be much more success. It's going to be much more successful if you're focusing on set periods and trying to do it all at once.
That's a good. There's several good things to notice in there. Because the thing I heard you say first, which is desperately important for people to hear, is when you first start figuring out how to do certain tasks, you're going to just automatically get better at them. And so it looks like multitasking works.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh yes, I don't know how to cook anything other than frozen waffles, and I also don't know how to, I don't know, insert other household task here, do laundry. And I kind of sort of cook this newer dinner concurrently with like getting stuff into the laundry. It looks like it works because you are getting better at both just because you're starting at zero and it's hard not to get better. Uh, and so that is a wonderful point because it speaks to the brain's reward system. When we find out a thing that works, what do? We just want to repeat that forever until we die. And we have a tendency to be very bad at noticing when it has stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a very good point because that really speaks to how easy it is for the multitasking behavior to get rewarded. Once you get good enough at something, you can no longer get better at it or be as good as you need to be at it while multitasking because it requires more, let's say, cognitive effort. Uh, and so you can't actually do it nearly so effectively. But a lot of people won't necessarily notice that. So I'm actually really glad you brought that up because it I think it would be helpful for people to know like, oh, let me re-examine this and see if at the level I'm trying to play at, can I actually still multitask or have I moved far and away beyond that? And I think there's something for the professional in here because especially for the business owner, but probably other professionals as well. Uh, when you get up to a certain level of doing something, multitasking becomes less useful because here's a good example. I brought up cleaning the gym. I assume you probably have somebody that does that now. I assume you don't do that yourself. Uh,
Yeah, I haven't cleaned the gym in a long time.
yeah,
I,
I did not imagine you had. Uh, and at the level of professional you're at, you shouldn't because if you took the, let's say, 2 hours it would take to clean the gym, you can write however many more programs and probably make enough to pay to have the gym cleaned for the next 6 months just off of that 2 hours of work instead of doing it yourself and imagining that the multitasking is somehow better
mm-hmm.
would be
Even
my
yeah,
guess.
I think that's a great example. I think like I said, we just get so many. Like I said, like we see so many things where we keep being told that more is better. That I really want people to focus. Like everything I want people to get out of this episode is focus on how much more success you can find by just focusing on one thing for the right amount of time. Like whether it is just talking about like your day, whether it is just simply like going through your day and in like just your planner and doing better there, or something much bigger is one thing has so much beauty in going back to like that deep work without distractions, or even just simply work without distractions. Because that's actually another part of multitasking is definitely the distracted part. Like I mentioned at the very beginning about how quickly it takes to get your focus back, and like multitasking is not only trying to do multiple things at once. It can also be doing one thing, but then giving yourself permission to keep being distracted by things that aren't important. Like when we started this, I'm not. It's probably because of this. Actually, this definitely happened because of what we're talking about today. I normally, like, let me give you a quick, 20-second glimpse as to how this works. I text JP, hey, I'm setting up. I open a tab to StreamYard, this thing right here, this thing that we're broadcasting to. I type up what we're doing. I send him the link. He comes on. The key point of that was I said I open a tab, and normally it's sitting there in the tab, which means I have 27 other tabs open, and a lot of times a chat message over here on the side, like for telegrams that I'm in, specifically because we're starting on this. And I'm like, okay, like, I want to be at my best and my most focused for the conversation, especially since we're talking about multitasking. I was like, Telegram, minimize, tab, open, like make it a new window, and then the window with all the other tabs minimize too. So the only thing on my screen now is this conversation. And it wasn't that I was going to try to do other things, but I knew that if having a chat over here and multiple tabs here, I knew that at least once I would click like if I left those things there, it would almost be like temptation. It would be like I'm gonna have to go check, like what's happening here. It is like they didn't come in. Like I would definitely click on something else if I was here. Phones are the other one for people. Like if you're when you try to do stuff, homework, work deadline, you name it, something like that, and you're constantly checking your phone, that adds up so much. So in those moments, so when you really want to get something done, like, put the phone away, put it in a drawer. That little change of having to get your phone out of a drawer will stop a lot of your get a lot of that like busy work and tension where you just manually pick it up not thinking about it. So
Oh,
multitasking is not just what we're do like what we think about doing multiple things. It's also removing those like little knick-knack things that might distract us.
let me kind of notice something there because it's where I wanted to go anyway, which is okay. Somebody's sold. They're like, yes, you're right. I need to single task more. How in the world do I do it? Uh, and you brought up like some little things that people are very vulnerable to wanting to reject. So let me. I wish I knew where I picked this up from, but it's not mine. But oh God, I say it every day. It's not stupid if it works.
Okay.
And the
I dig it.
reason this is important is because a lot of people will come up with the idea like, well, I mean, I should just be able to single task. I shouldn't need to have to put my phone in a
Mhm.
drawer. So let me give you a good example of my life, and it's not stupid if it works. Here at our clinic, I have three offices. I have my therapy office, and I have my work office, and then I have a second work office. The reason I have a second work office is because apparently I need that to single task. One work office is where I do all of my emails, and it's where my laptop lives, and it's where like the electronics live, and it's where I do all of the multitasking that is required. And when it's time to single task, I go down to the other office where my laptop is not allowed to enter. And I am allowed to have my phone if I have it for a specific purpose. But I mean, I sit there and I take with me the material I need. And that is all that is in that office. If what I'm working on is tax stuff, I have only the tax stuff. And I don't take the insurance stuff down there, or I don't take treatment plans down there because if I look over and I'm like, oh, right, treatment plans, I need to write this down on this treatment plan before I forget it. Well, now I'm screwing up. So I literally have two offices. One of them is the single tasking office because apparently I just can't properly discipline myself without having a second office. And I often have to remind myself it's not stupid if it works. But now, if we take this and look at anybody's life and say, okay, what would you need to single task? They would have a lot of answers, but they would be answers that they would be hesitant to allow themselves to engage with if they didn't have permission to just do dumb stuff that'll work. Uh, there's one of my favorite things that wise parents do is when they're playing with their kid, they get their phone not only out of their sight, but out of the room they're in. Like they'll go throw it on their bed in the bedroom while they play with their kid in the living room so that they can't just reach over and look at it and suddenly like then get engaged with their phone while they're supposed to be playing with their kid. Now, a lot of people would come up with, "Oh, this is no good. I should just be able to discipline myself." whatever it takes to single task, whatever it takes to get the distractions away from you because you're conditioned for them. It's okay to just need to get them away from yourself.
Absolutely. And yet removing and or only taking what you need, I think are great ways to great ways to do that. Like I've always been I think I'm gonna try to do way more than I feasibly should in a daily amount of time guy. Like that's a daily thing that I work through. And that isn't just the whole day, that's even in pieces or when I move. Like when I'm here at the home office and let's say that I want to go out to the couch and I want to take like something to work on over there like while like TV's in the background, basically like that low mental effort time spent say like with the family or something. Um I almost always have to make it a 2-point process because it's almost always taking way more things than I'm actually should. A lot of times, like I don't know what I'm going to work on, so I'll take it all. So I'll take like my planner and my laptop and 3 different notebooks because I don't know which one I'll use, and and I'll do that first, and then almost always after that, I'm like, okay, I'm not actually going to touch half of this stuff, and then I'll like bring it back, set it down, like so I have to almost like put it all out there, and then I break it down into what I actually want. So it's funny because it's a similar situation, like similar ordeal to the only allowing yourself to take so many things. And I say a lot of times, like like anybody who's working on this, who finds this, like some like okay, so here's some things like symptoms, I guess you could say, or ways to tell that your multitasking is not working. One, you're mad
Just
stressed.
know it's not. I'm sorry, I couldn't stand
Hey,
not to say
hey,
it.
um, the more PR response. You're mad, like one, you're mad stressed about it. Like you were consistently stressed about having too much to do or why is something not getting done, which leads directly to number two, things aren't getting done. Like if you look at something and you're like, wow, like, okay, this should take me 2 hours. This should take me 30 minutes. I should be able to finish this like in a week. Like, if you look at any of these things and look at it that way, and then that 1 week thing, 2.5 weeks later, you still don't know when you're going to get done. Or the 30-minute thing, after 4 hours, you're still not actually done with it. And you're only making progress. These are all like those are symptoms of I'm probably trying to do too many different things at once. And if I actually want to get this done, or not be again crazy stressed about why it's not getting done, you need to focus on less, aka ideally one thing. Two things is better than four, but I would really like to see you get down to one. Get down to that one thing at a time. So, so like making those improvements to make that happen. Now, again, like we talk about a lot, this is going to take practice. You're not going to be able to just do this automatically, and you're going to and always self experiment to find the way that it actually is going to work with you, and that you're going to make it stick. Like Jonathan's extra office. um, like I said, like my brain always works, and I have to get all my stuff together and then take it apart, which is a super slow way of doing a lot of things like that work. That's how I have to do laundry. That's how I have to clean. Like it's so
It's not stupid if it works.
but exactly. I'm like, wow, I wish I could just go straight to figuring this out. I have to get my stuff together and then break it apart to what I want to do. But yeah, it's not stupid if it works. I just realized it's slow. um but yeah, so to just find the way that whatever it is that lets you get in that zone where you can just do the one, like just focus on that one thing that that you want to move forward. Whether it is work, time with your kids is an absolutely awesome example. Time with your family, like fitness again. Like if you're trying to, especially being early in the year, you're trying to get fitter. If you can like actually devote 30 to 60 good minutes to your workout without being distracted in phone calls, etc. Like this
Or
is
looking at your phone.
yeah. Um,
Matter of fact, just quick tip. That's one of the reasons I'll put on a song just on repeat because then I don't have to. Oh, which song should I listen to next?
Almost all my productivity is one song on repeat
Yep.
for like a month. or longer. Currently it's Pearl Jam's Jeremy. I have a 30-minute commute and I'll either listen to an audiobook or that song 6 times.
Mine's right now. Mine is it's from any of the Iron Man movies. Anytime Tony Stark's building something, just like whatever song that is on repeat.
Nice, very nice. Um, yeah, like it's funny
So
'cause
there's something that I want to make sure to point out because I think this is important. There's some of these changes that either you or me will have a tendency to already be like pretty decent at and pretty far down the path. Single tasking is one of these that I'm not sure if anybody ever really gets that good at it because our brain is always so desperate to return to multitasking. So I think the thing I really want to make sure to point out to people is if you decide to adopt this and try it, number one, don't expect it to be natural. Don't expect to be good at it easily, quickly, or efficiently. And don't expect it to be a thing where you at some point achieve like some level of mastery. This is one of those, most people, I'm sure there's some outlier exceptions, most people seem to achieve proficiency, and that's the best they can hope for because the brain is always hungry to go back to multitasking. And I think a lot of people really beat up on themselves when they try and start working on this concept because they think it's going to one day be natural. Like you can make a golf swing natural, and just now the thing you do. This, if there's anybody that gets so good at this that it becomes natural, I don't know that I have gotten to hear their story.
monks.
Yeah, like we have to go live up on top of a mountain
It's like-
with nothing else around in order to be able to single task. Like I'm not sure that's
exactly.
being good at it. I think that's designing your circumstances to make it easier is what that
Same
is.
thing. Hey, same thing. That's what we're talking
Not
about.
stupid if it works.
Yeah. So yeah, here's one of the things for me with people. When you're looking at a lot of people who seem keywords seem to be very high functioning multitaskers, it's like how can they do so many things at once? The business world is full of this, serial entrepreneurs. Like these guys are doing so many things. Meanwhile, the business that I started, like I'm struggling. I'm 3 years in, I'm 5 years in. Like some months I can still barely pay the bills, whatever. Really easy. Like this business like is a great example at comparison syndrome, like we're like trying to compare where other people are versus where you are. And like, here's the thing, like again, with super rare exception that I don't even know about. Almost every successful like multi-venture entrepreneur that we've ever heard of that has the multiple businesses built them one by one. Like, I don't know of any of them where they didn't, or if they happen to be involved in multiple, someone else wasn't doing most of the work somewhere else. You know, um, I mean, like Bezos, started Amazon with books. It was books. We sell books. And that's still the number one thing they sell, I think. But again, like he didn't try to build it and like offer everything under the sun at first. It was books. And but that's still even then, that's one company. So Musk, like I don't know which one was first. And yeah, he had his parents' money to help out and all that stuff. But again, it was like PayPal. There was a PayPal era. There was a there was an era where he started Tesla. There was an era where he started SpaceX. There was an era, where when he bought Twitter, it wasn't he did all these things at the same time and was going back and forth. It was one. Then once one was stabilized / systemized, etc., move into the next. And you see this like there's like in the business world, there's a really common idea out there of, oh, the average millionaire has 7 different streams of income, blah blah blah. And way too many people take that and think I need to create 7 streams of income in order to become financially successful. the actual message should be almost everybody who did this started with one stream of income, got it really good, and then used it to help create others. So a lot of times, when we think we're seeing good multitasking, we're missing that it actually got there through single tasking, or completely different circumstances. Like I love the success of not just entrepreneurs, but like black entrepreneurs in that you don't that I'm gonna say you wouldn't expect. Like Shaq is a multi like he has his hands in so many things. But like Snoop Dogg, like Ashley and I were watching Snoop Dogg on the Property Brothers last night. And he has so many different businesses now. Like but they all started after he became, like a successful rapper and music icon. Um like Master P from whatever I don't know what rap group he's in, but he's another one. He's like business mega successful person now, and it all started with just being really good at music or
So
athletes.
let me shrink this down to the every person, because you've got something really great here. But since not everybody's trying to be Snoop or Musk or Bezos, but you've got something here. So for the person trying to figure out, like, what's an effective way to add this to my life, what you're saying is correct. Figure out a thing to specialize in and single task hard on. Once you get specialized in that area, then you're eligible to single task hard in another area to get specialized. Once you get specialized in that area, then you can maybe get specialized in another area. Now, these look like multitasking, but they're not, because a person's probably taking, several months or several years to learn one skill set and learn it well before they try and add the next skill set. And some of these things looks like different skill sets, and they're not. Because, like, yeah, Shaq basically has his fingers in everything, but he actually only has three skill sets. Which is basketball, buy businesses, be funny.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
his three skill sets. He just figured out he could take those three things and, like, do them in a lot of areas. It looks like he knows a lot. He actually only knows those three things, as far as I can tell. And so I think what a lot of people actually make up that you have to know everything and you have to be a super skilled generalist,
Yes.
instead of figure out what the areas you're going to specialize in, and then use that to get the benefits of what we think multitasking would be, but really you're just single tasking over and over and over again, and, like, changing it by 10 degrees and, excuse me, doing that.
All right, brother. So I would like you to wrap this up with your points. And then I'm going to add a super completely unexpected nerd ending for
Oh
today.
God. So, all right. Number one, you can't navigate by your felt sense. Multitasking always feels better than single tasking. You have to just know and trust that many times, not all the time, many times, making big progress on a single task is better and wiser. Number two, having a story to tell yourself. Sadly, I didn't get to get into the weeds on that one. I largely stuck to only one point, which is knowing kind of how the math works. Knowing that, in Jerry's case, an example he gave, spending X number of hours on Sunday night single tasking, it saves 28 hours across the week. That's incredible math. Yours will probably not be so advantageous to start, but it will certainly be better in if you select the right single task. How do I pick what to single task on? Easy way is to ask yourself, if I could only work on something 2 hours a week, what would it be? 90% chance that's a decent thing to single task on. And then the myth of the people who are amazing multitaskers. Really, they're probably amazing single taskers, and just they look like good multitaskers. All right, let's see what the surprise
All right.
twist ending is. I hope this is not going to be like M. Night Shyamalan, like
No.
crazy twist here.
So 50 years ago, Gary Gygax had it right when we started Dungeons and Dragons. So like the other races you could pick, elves, dwarves, etc., they can multi-class more than one class at a time because they get to live hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands. Humans had to pick one class. We could be good at one thing and getting that one and focus on that one thing. And when a human wanted to be something else, he had to completely, or she had to completely switch classes and 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 get good at that before they could start doing two things at once again. So again, Gary Gygax understood the difference between multitasking or single tasking really good, and then being able to do two things at once later.
That is amazing, and that's an older version of D&D than I ever started learning how to play. So you win the nerd points today.
Yes. So all right, man. So good return to 2024. Again, everybody, thank you for listening in. Again, we'll be here with the live broadcast every 2 weeks. And again, check out Asymmetric Habits, where you can find your podcast, particularly on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, because we release an episode on there every week. Every week. So I hope this helps you out. Again, share it, review anything like that if you got something out of it, and we'll catch you guys later. See
See
you, brother.
y'all.
Thanks again.